What I said in the first video on balance about engine weight affecting the balance, giving grip and inertia, that is true. But the results of the different engine layouts I mentioned is nonsense. That was only true driving in one conventional grip religious way. I use that one way of driving for all engine layouts to show what weight does and what's what. The truth is, as I mentioned right in the first video and in the last few videos, drifting can actually in some cases be fast. You gotta learn how to drive a car, know the center of balance, and drive it properly the way it should be driven. What I'm saying is, if you say that an RX-7 understeers, you can't drive. And with unbalanced driving, you can manage to make the engine of an NSX a liability to the point of acting like there's a transaxle. Balance in driving is as important as balance in building a car. And wheel speed ratio is extremely important. It is one of the main deciding factors of whether your engine is a help or a liability. A low wheel speed ratio favoring the front wheels having more speed causes understeer, especially in an FR. A too high wheel speed ratio favoring rear wheels moving faster causes oversteer and twitchiness, especially in a mid-engine car. Although a slightly higher wheel speed ratio on an FR lets the wheels rotate around the engine, the wheel speed ratio is 100 billion trillion times more important than people think. By input of throttle, braking, coasting, or if it's a four-wheel drive, torque bias, brake bias, steering, every input, every action from the driver changes the wheel speed ratio. And the wheel speed ratio decides if your engine is a strength or a liability. Downshifting, coasting, and letting the engine slow the rear wheels down in a twitchy mid-engine car will make you take the corner more stably. So now you have absolutely no excuse, and you can't call that Audi RS3 a bad handling piece of trash. But there is a physical limit. Driving it right doesn't mean you're absolutely invincible and can take a corner at 500 kilometers per hour. There is a physical limit. Driving it right is the most important. But there's also fine-tuning on the car that can raise the limit slightly. Tuning is in everything. There's chassis tuning, downforce tuning, suspension tuning. It goes very far. Little changes to refine the handling and stretch out the limit to the absolute max, and to your driving preferences, most importantly, because different tunes go with different driving styles as much as different geometry foundations go with different driving styles. With suspension, there's compression, rebound, toe, camber, ride height, dive to squat ratio, lean stiffness, bump stiffness. There's tires, there's downforce distribution, and there's rake. Tuning also influences handling, and it also works by the laws of balance. So like I said in the last video on driving, you must fine-tune your driving to the fine-tuning of the car. Front bias grip tuning, leaning towards oversteer, favors smooth driving and very little steering input, whereas rear grip bias tuning, leaning toward understeer, favors aggressive driving and allows you to be more aggressive and early with throttle input. I'm gonna talk about Fernando Alonso, one of the all-time greats, personally one of my favorite drivers of all time. I'm gonna explain how he perfectly balanced his well-loved understeering Renault. First of all, Alonso developed amazing adaptation skills from young in go-karting. You see, his family didn't have all the money in the world, so they just managed to get him into karting. But they couldn't provide slick tires, all-weather tires, intermediate tires, and wet tires, and all these fancy things. So on days when the track was wet, Fernando Alonso by himself had to hone his skills, try get the most out of the tires in the rainy conditions. So his special environment allowed him to become one of the most adaptive drivers. He was born in nature. Alonso and the most adaptive apex predators grew up together. That's the truth. This made him truly one of the most skilled drivers with quite a dangerous aura. In this video, we're going to study his driving and learn his technique to see what made him a world champion. First of all, his Formula One car that won him these championships. The 2004 Renault R24. My word, they put zero effort into making this name cool. R24, you can't get something more basic and sensible than that. Renault 2004. R24, what? Oh my word, Renault, you are boring. But I'll tell you what, the car really isn't boring. I'm taking the 2004 model. I'm not going to give the specs of every single year, but it was just a lot of fine tuning. It wasn't really huge changes. So I'm just going to use the 2004 model. The front track was 1,450 millimeters. Rear was 1,400. The wheelbase was 3,100 millimeters. Overall length, 4,600 millimeters. Height, 950 millimeters. Weighing in at 605 kilograms. It was powered by a glorious mid-rear mounted 3.0 liter V10, making 820 horsepower. Engine connected to a 6-speed single-clutch gearbox, mounted just in front of the rear axle, connected directly to the differential. And the gearbox was also a stress member holding the suspension together. It was a part of the chassis. You can argue this is very midship. Technically, yeah, but the engine is kind of very far back. Because I know it's not as far back as a 488's engine, because the engine is not directly next to the differential. It's far back enough to be called mid-rear, okay? If you look at the whole car and where the engine is, it's very mid-rearship. Now that you know what's Alonso's favorite ride, we're going to see how two living legends merged in perfect balance. The car was tuned to his specific driving style, favoring understeer as a natural tendency. And the technique he honed is bizarre.
In extra detail, the favored understeer is just a rear bias grip. His technique demands a grippy rear end, and Alonso said before that his hands are tied without enough feedback from rear and front especially.
Coming towards the corner braking, he would make a faint little bit of turn in to place the car at the right angle facing the turn. Into the late part of entry, he would aggressively turn hard, creating a refined desired level of understeer, going a little bit deep into the corner due to the understeer, and then he would open the throttle early and brutally wide, but controlled in order to rotate the car, all four wheels around the engine, and exit at blistering speeds. Full throttle by the exit, no question.
The understeer made by the dominant rear end gives room for opening the throttle to rotate the car and go like hell. And the open throttle eases the front end and lets him steer harder, since the wheels are rotating around the engine. That's why the engine placement geometry in F1 cars and NSXs are called perfect.
Sometimes he'd even skid the rear slightly with zero countersteer to rotate the car, making up for too much understeer. It might seem like he was compensating for understeer with the brutal acceleration, four-wheel drift, but everything is calculated. Not one bit of his technique is a mistake. The understeer was intentional. Alonso is very old school. Just like me, he loves exit speed, and sometimes it shows that he even loves four-wheel drifts. Just look at how brutal his acceleration is. And notice, because of his technique and because of the whole process of his driving through the corner, the turn in, the understeer, and the acceleration, his preferred line is a V-line. The understeer move occurring around here and full beans all the way through. You see, Alonso is known for being the guy who takes slow cars, takes them all the way to their limits and wins. And this technique of his also saved his tires. What? How? It's so aggressive. I'll tell you exactly how. It's because he managed to rotate all four wheels around the engine. Mind-blowing. The unbelievable throttle control he showed in 2007 with an overtake in the lane. In these terrible conditions, look at his throttle control. He's on another level. It's just fair to say, he's just had some terribly bad luck in his life. I don't know how he got it right, but a lot of the time he's just fallen in really bad luck.
But Fernando Alonso, as a 42-year-old world champion, has proved himself a real grandmaster, grip king. And this name brings me to an interesting someone who has a similar name, Drift King.
Also a great legend. Also in his old age driving to this day. And his name is Keiichi Tsuchiya. Personally, my #1 favorite driver of all time. And we're gonna delve into his technique and what made him also one of the most brutal, dangerous drivers ever. Keiichi Tsuchiya also has a style similar to Alonso. His greatest machine, probably his NSX-R, that he's been tuning and perfecting for 10 years. It is one of the most perfect balanced cars I've seen. But we're gonna delve into Keiichi's technique, specifically with the FR. If you don't know what an FR is, it's a front-engine rear-wheel drive car. Yeah, go learn your stuff.
When he drives a car he feels should have enough front grip, he tries to get the full potential out of the front tires. He would turn in very hard and aggressively, and twist the tires as much as he can, and he opens the throttle to make the rear follow the front, easing the front end getting closer to perfect wheel to engine rotation. But the best part of his technique is in his throttle control.
During the turn, once it starts understeering, he would open the throttle to skid the rear wheels, using them to steer the car, giving the car more aggressive rotation around the engine. To corner most efficiently, with his technique, he can turn an FR as fast as an MR. His personal A86, he skids almost all the time on every corner.
He faces the car at the apex, and once he's hit the apex, it's facing the exit. He rotates it perfectly so he can pin all the power down early.
The efficiency of every drift is perfect to the T. Just enough to rotate the car, and then he puts foot down, giving it all the beans. You still want to ask, why is he my favorite driver? And you say, what? How can you rank Keiichi Tsuchiya with Fernando Alonso? Fernando's on a different level. He's a Formula 1 driver. Yes, I know. But the point is, there are two drivers who have taken cars to their limits and learned how to balance a car. So please, don't come to me and tell me you want to race with your Koenigsegg Jesko, saying there's more than enough room for errors, since you've got the power and torque to pull down the Eiffel Tower and extreme track capabilities, using it as a crutch to lean on. You are not a driver unless you balance it, seek the limit, and manage to drive it at the limit. You don't use a Koenigsegg as a crutch to depend on for bad driving. You drive it once you can. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you think about Alonso and Keiichi the Greats. In one of the next episodes coming, we're going to be talking about Michael Schumacher, or Shoemaker as some people call him.
さあそれではノリノリ号はどうか としてる。車がすんげえちゃんとしてる。やっぱりステアリングレスポンスからボディ構成からサスペンション、タイヤ、もう全部がねバランスいいね。